All right, so welcome to the Unreal Workshop. My name's Edward. I'm a student here at FIU doing computer science with specialization in real-time engines and virtual reality. Um, what I'm going to basically essentially go over is a very much beginner workshop into using the Unreal Engine toolset. We're going to be mostly focused on purely what you would need to do to acquire it, just in case you appear at the workshop without having downloaded it or even having downloaded the project. Um, uh, what exactly it is versus other tools, what you can do with it versus what you might have originally perceived you could do with it, and just trying to get you as comfortable as possible, slash ease you in to the way it looks and stuff like that, because it tends to be at least perceived by people to be more intimidating than, for example, Unity's environment, since there's a lot more buttons and stuff going on than you would normally see from, for example, Unity's editor. So I'll try to make correlations to Unity's editor because that's what most people are used to while doing the workshop. And the beginning would be heavily focused on just getting the UI element meta pattern that they use exposed and understood. And then from there, I'm going to show you how to basically make your first object a rotating cube, just the way you would create the asset, add the logic to it, and then drag and drop it into the map. From there, I will possibly give it another material, but that will pretty much be it, since I'm going to try to, again, do it relatively slow so that no one loses track of what exactly is going on. So with that outlines laid out, Unreal Engine is provided by Epic Games, the same people who make Fortnite and Valorant. Not Valorant, sorry, that's right. And the Epic Games Store with their platform. They use actually the same exact distributing platform software. It's not actually separate from the regular store and game library. They just have a section called Unreal, and it has its own library section where you can add engine binaries. I have you can use any of these. Anything older than 4.22 and higher is going to be pretty much fine for what I'm going to be showing. In order to get it, you can just go to here or their Epic Games regular website. When you first appear here, let's say you signed out, and you go to download, there's going to be two licensing options. You're just going to want the regular creator's license. This is more for people who are more serious with getting a product out. And this, you can switch the license at any time. It's just a, for now, you can consider it similar to like using a Visual Studio or Unity's license, free to use. You don't have to worry about any of that until you have a working product that you're going to start working for a company. So from there, once you've press the download button, it'll just tell you to it'll just get you set up to install the Epic Games Launcher. You add the engine, and then from there you can launch it. I'll launch it first. While that's going, see if I can get this open. You can also get access to the actual engine source code, which is one of the nice features of this engine versus Unity. Unity, weirdly, is one of the only engines right now, major engines, that doesn't have actual access to their source. It's not, to be clear, Unreal Engine is not open source in the sense that it's like you can just use the code, build it, and then, you know, distribute it your own way. It's more of just like you get access to the source code, you can modify it within their license agreement and such that. You have to actually register on their website first to get access to their repo list. And then from there, you can clone it, build the engine from scratch. They have actually a pretty easy method for doing so. It takes about 40 minutes on a Ryzen 3600, and then you can use it just like if you were downloaded it from the Epic Game Store. So when you launch Unreal Engine, you're going to be met with this page, and it's going to show 4 options: games, film, television, and all the other things. Specifically, since I think maybe like 2 years ago, I think that's when it really got started. Unreal started to be heavily used for other industries other than games mainly. So as you can see here, they have film, architecture, and automotive design and stuff like that. Specifically, the film and television side has become really big with virtual production. And that's they're adding features pretty much with every major version. Recently, they're on a version freeze though, because they're waiting to release Unreal Engine 5, which if you haven't seen their press release for that, it's a massive deal. They have some really crazy technologies coming out. One of them is called Nanite, and there's another one called Lumen, which is a new way of doing global illumination, all this kinds of stuff that looks absolutely phenomenal. They also have a lot of ease of use tools they're bringing for artists and technical artists and regular artists that will make making really high production value stuff really easily. So if you like the link to this, you can just search Unreal 5, and this is one of the first videos that pops up. And there's a bunch of people talking about what that engine entails and stuff like that. So moving on to, that's pretty much the end of the background. Going to making a project. I have a project that you can get from a repository I have. It's optional, you don't need to have it. The major benefit of it, and I'll show it later, is I have a bunch of notes. It's not actually a lot of code, it's pretty much no code almost, but it has a lot of notes relating to, and pre-done blueprints relating to the gameplay framework and creating and managing assets and stuff like that to help with beginners. So I highly recommend checking that out later. You can get it from this repository link. Let me bring that up real quick. So if you just search up GGJ 2020 workshop, maybe with my username, it'll pop up, but I'll also put in the Zoom. See if I can get chat open. Where's the chat icon? I haven't actually used Zoom in a long time. Well, I'll have it on the Discord, so it'll be fine. So okay, so going forward, if you don't have the project, what you can do is just create a third-person project template. I'm gonna click next and just pick the default content. I'm gonna pick scalable 3D or 2D. It's better if you don't have a high-performance computer. And I'll keep everything else good. You're gonna notice it says to use a Blueprint or C++ project. We're gonna be using Blueprint, and it's essentially Unreal's scripting language, major scripting language, and you can basically make an entire game without ever touching any actual C++ code. They also have, if you do want to use regular scripting language, they have bindings to C#, and I believe Python. I'm not sure. I have to double check that. But anyways, we'll be using Blueprint, and I'll open up this. It is a pure visual scripting language in the sense that it's like you're messing with a flowchart on draw.io, except it does stuff essentially. So when you open the third-person project, you're greeted with this editor, and let's see if I can get this out of the way. Yep. The first things you'll notice is you got the scene viewport, the same scene viewport that you have in Unity. There really isn't a game viewport like you have in Unity. Instead, if you just press play, it'll switch you automatically to game. And then you have full control of the character. This thing already has everything set up so you can just move around, press the arrow keys, press space to jump, look around, and some objects to platform around in. If you press escape, you'll end it. You'll see that if you click, it focuses, but you can press Shift F1 to unfocus. And there's also this eject option. If you press the eject option, you're basically in scene view. So that's how you switch between scene view and game view in Unreal, essentially. You'll notice the first thing I started to interact with other than the scene view is this thing up here. This is basically your context menu toolbar. You're going to see it in multiple windows. It's a reoccurring thing. It's going to have the same similar options. So you have your save. You're going to have this thing called modes. There's the, this is like a shortcut to different modes, brushes, or like tool sets. It's similar to like how you have in Photoshop the marquee tool, the brush tool, mesh editing tools. It's basically like that kind of thing, or with or like the stuff you have in Blender or Maya. That's what modes basically entails. And it also has a lot of preset objects you can pick from. So in Unity, the equivalent of this is like if you go to your hierarchy and you right click and you have these objects you can pick from. It's similar to that. The only difference is like in Unity, if you wanted to like click on to do a landscape or to, when you click on a specific object, some different tools appear. In this, however, it's not necessarily the case. You have to pick the landscape tool first, and then you'll get the landscape options. So it's not first getting the landscape object out, and then you have the tool. It's the other way around. So I can just show you dragging and dropping a regular cube object into the scene like that. The hierarchy for Unreal is on your right side, and it's called the world outline. It essentially behaves the same way, but it is not what you would, technically speaking, the major difference between this one and Unity is that the Unity scene hierarchy is a proper, what they call entity component system. And the reason it's different is you don't really have the sense of, I guess, prefabs in Unreal, and the way you interact with the hierarchy is not as flexible. Instead, you have like these things, which the basic type unit that you can put in here, instead of it being what in Unity I think it's called a mono behavior object or game object. In Unreal, it's an actor. And the actor, you can have different types of actors. The base one is just regular actor, but you also have some really hard-coded ones like static mesh actors for models. You have some lighting objects. And you'll see that they have, if you click on anything in here, the details plane will pop up, and that's the equivalent of the inspector from Unity. You also notice that I'm able to maneuver the UI wherever I like, just like in Unity. It's fully dynamic. You can place it and customize it anywhere you like. And you can save this layout, but it's, let's see, it's right over here. If you go to Window, instead of it being an option on the top right, it's on the top left, and you can save it there. So if you click on any actor, you'll get the inspector view, and it has the entity's components, but it's not really a system per se, because instead of you having objects parented, like you drag and drop an object to be parented to this thing, you can attach it, but it's a weak attachment. You could also do a heavier attachment, for example, when I get to making a blueprint object, where you can have a sub-scene view for that object, I guess close, which is similar to how a prefab behaves. If you special click a prefab, you get the special view of the sub-object stuff. Unreal's blueprint actor objects are basically the same way, and I'll show you what I mean by that soon. I know I'm throwing, just as, again, a preface. I am throwing a lot of words at you. I don't expect you to know every word I'm throwing at you. I'm kind of just buffering the information because this is a lot. And I'm hoping that you have some exposure since you're going to a game jam, or that you can at least look it up if you look at the recording of this tutorial on the terms I'm using to help you get an idea and massage yourself on the concepts involved. So these are the major component UI for Unreal, and they're not going to really change. They're not going to really change much between windows. They're going to pretty much stay the same, with exception to maybe modes not showing here. There's going to be an outline per object. There's going to be a details plane per major window, and I'll show you that soon. Before I get to that, let me focus more on the scene view options, I guess, as I forgot that this is high performance. Over here on the top left, you'll see that they have several options for how you can view things. Perspective is default, but you also have these orthographic views that you can pick from, similar to in Unity. If you go back to scene, you have wireframe options, and then you can click on this thing for orthographic, and you can choose an axis to view it from. It's basically the equivalent, except this thing is just color coded slightly. If I go back to perspective, there's different lighting modes. So if you're having a hard time performance-wise, you can switch to unlit. And then also, if you're still having a hard time with that, you can go to your settings here, and there's engine scalability options. So you can kill your resolution. You could try to lower your anti-aliasing, view distance. The ones you should watch out for and not mess with are shading, effects possibly, and I doubtful, but maybe shadows, and or at least don't make them go below medium. The reason is if you do that, you have to do a shader compilation. So far, you haven't seen a shader compilation occur because I had pre-shader compiled them beforehand. But like, for example, if I make quickly material objects and I open it and then I add a color, you don't have to do this. I'm just trying to show you an example of what you would see at the beginning. There we go, and I press apply. I did it too quickly, but you would see on the bottom right something that says shader compile. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. And when that's occurring, it's essentially going to be really heavy processing on your computer, and you're not going to be able to see any objects in your scene. So you're going to want to wait that out if you possibly can, in order to prevent this thing from crashing or from having weird artifacts while you're trying to use the editor. So going from there, if you've had a trouble, once you have it in a working version, you can have different ways of viewing the scene from here. There's the wireframe mode. There's different variants of lighting options, and different more complex views if you're trying to do really specific things with like finalization of a scene, if you're trying to like finish off a game for release, for example, or something like that. There's also these views over here that also help for performance. So if you go to show post-processing and disable these, all the fancy effects will be removed, and it should also give you back some FPS. The last place you can probably configure some settings is over here for the viewport options. So you can show your FPS. You can change your field of view for the camera. And the screen percentage stuff also helps with the resolution. I'll just keep mine at default. And over here, you can change the different rendering modes in case you want to work on a mobile game and stuff like that. There used to be an HTML option, but I guess that's gone now for at least this version, or you have to get a plugin for that. Okay. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. If it says lighting to be built, because let's say you moved an object in the scene and it's baked or something, and it's just throwing this, that it looks like an error. It's not an error, it's fine. You can still play the game just fine. Nothing will be wrong with it, essentially. To fix that, you just have to press this build option. Specifically, you can either do that or you can build everything. And it'll just launch a console process and then get that done. And there you go. There's some shader compiling, building lighting, and that message will go away. Lastly, if you want to configure some more advanced settings or enable specific plugins, you can go to the Edit tab and you can find those there. Editor preferences are basically going to, these setting configurations will last between your engine installations. So this is not per project, this is for how you're going to be using the editor of the engine version you're using. And they have a bunch of stuff here for like how you can customize how blueprints behave, different major windows essentially, the appearance of your editor, some stuff related to VR and performance options that you maybe can be set so the engine would maybe behave either if you want more performance, you don't want it to chug in the background, you can do that, or maybe you're baking something, you want to keep it going, you can disable that, stuff like that. The project settings naturally are per project, and it has pretty much, it has a high def amount of configuration for how you do things. So this would be equivalent to if you go to Unity, edit, project settings and preferences combined, kinda. So if you go in here, these are pretty much equivalent. When it comes to package management, here is a difference. There's two ways you can essentially get assets into your project. You can either just in your content browser, which is essentially the same as the project folder assets directory in Unity, you can go into Windows and drag and drop assets that you maybe get from GitHub or something, or you can import them using the Epic Store. So in the Epic Store, they have a marketplace where you can get assets that's similar to the Unity Asset Store. Every month, there's 5 free assets. I highly recommend checking these out if you plan to use Unreal in the future. There's also a bunch of free assets that you can get. You can see there's a permanently free collection, and it's really huge. They've pretty much dumped assets from abandoned projects and stuff like that as well. For example, Paraground, which is one of their MOBAs, and it's more than enough assets to make multiple game projects if you're learning. If you keep getting the free assets, they really do add up. Pretty much more than half of these that I have in what they call a vault here. This is where you view your assets. We're pretty much from the free for the month or from their permanently free sections. I maybe purchased 10 of these at most. So the way you would add it is you see that it has this add to project thing. You can then pick your project and then it would add it from there. If you bought the other way you could, let's say it wasn't an asset content, you could also get something, you can also get separately plugins, which behave more like you installed it for the engine, essentially. And there's a bunch by default that are disabled. So you should actually sift through this because you might find something for free that you didn't know you had access to. Notably speaking, like every single virtual reality platform is supported by default. You don't have to get a separate plugin for it. There is one. I can talk about that later in QA or during the advanced workshop. But essentially, you really don't. Unreal has packed full of so many features out of the box that rarely need to go outside of it, except for maybe 3D models, animations, and stuff like that. Otherwise, when it comes to functionality speaking, you don't really need to go outside the box for most indie or like amateur-based kind of games. So from there, I'm trying to think of anything else UI-wise before I start making a functional object. Let's see. There is a thing called a modes that will be unfamiliar to you. Let me see if I can bring that up. World settings. Yes, so there's this thing called a game mode, the game mode, which is essentially a high-level gameplay framework system that Unreal has built in. So you don't have to like download the gameplay framework repo from Unity. It's just you have this thing and you can basically set up a game mode for your map. I'll be going over this in the Unreal workshop. By default, you don't have to do anything. If you drag and drop a pawn, the game will behave. So it will auto detect which character you want to play as. It'll set up the gameplay framework for you, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about this. This is more for if you're going to be doing more advanced things. You're going to be switching between levels that have different behaviors in the way they play. Then you start worrying about game mode. You can also access this thing. So let's say you want the default game mode for your entire project from the project settings. If you go to maps and modes, you can set up your editor, game default startup map, and then you'll have this game mode stuff. And you can see by default, they have the third person game mode I was talking about that they already have preset up for you to use. Okay, and I think that's all UI stuff. So now I'll show you how to make your first object instead of messing with default stuff. And the way you're going to do that is by interacting with the content browser. So if you look at your content browser and you press right click, you'll get this menu that you saw me pop up before. This is similar to the Unity right click menu when you go to your hierarchy or your content folder. Yeah, right here, there's a create option and you can create, for example, C# scripts, shaders, scene stuff, and things like that. You can do the same thing. So you have level, which is basically your scene. Your blueprint class basically represents your C# script, plus a bunch of other things. It's a little bit more complicated than that now. In the sense, this is basically a wrapper object for if you got a scene object in Unity. So let's say let me just drop a cube in here just to give you an example. In Unity, this would be like you had a cube, you made a prefab of it, and then you made a script, and then you attach the script to the cube. That's basically a blueprint object. It does all those things for you, except it doesn't come with, usually doesn't, if you just click blueprint class and you pick actor, it won't have a look to it. You'll see a sphere here, which is basically their empty icon, and you'll get this will not be an object, it'll just be empty. So as you just saw me do, if you right click blueprint class, you'll be creating a blueprint class. If you right click level, you create a level, material, and they have a bunch of other stuff related to different things. So animations, animation blueprints, basically how you do your animation states for if you had a player character or some sort of skeletal mesh character that can move around. Artificial intelligence, this is pretty advanced. I don't have time to go over that, but they have 3 nice helper things that this is basically flow charting and stuff like that. They have other things you can do with blueprints when it comes to pure functionality. They also have these 2 things over here. I can't go into those. I'll save that for the advanced workshop. And the other major thing is this widget blueprint, which is how you make UI. And I'll be giving tutorials, and also before the advanced workshop, I'll be giving a bunch of tutorial content to help go over those things. But what I'm going to show you now is basically going to be the same way you would interact with them UI wise. So if you go and you make a blueprint class, you'll have this menu. for the kind of objects you can make. The most basic, that if you want to have it in the level, the most basic one is the actor, like I said before. There's many types of actors you can make, mounts and loads. Camera actor is kind of like your free floating actor. Regular actor is, again, just your basic object you can just throw in. And many others. I can't go into all of them again. So for now, we're just going to click regular actor. And I'm going to call this rotating cube. And then if you double click it, it will open a new window. And in your new window, you can just tab it here. And you'll be greeted with this kind of interface. So viewport is basically your personal scene view for that object. If you right click, you get to move around. One thing I note, if you're having a really fast view and you want to slow it down, instead of you pressing shift to change speeds like in Unity, you just use the scroll wheel and it'll change the speed for you. You could also change the default major speed using this toolbar option here, and that will help out there. On your left, this components tab is basically your scene hierarchy for the object itself. And you see it has a default scene root. And these are all the default components that every Unreal object has. You can see it has a lot more than usual than you would naturally expect. And there's a bunch of options here. Replications relate to multiplayer. You can change the update rate and all kinds of other stuff for how it behaves. We'll be focused on just adding one thing to these components here. So if you right click, if you add component here, a bunch of components that you can add to this blueprint asset show up. The one we want is this cube object here, cube component. And it's basically what we just now created is similar to the modes object that we had access to out here. So if I open back up the mode menu, don't see it. It's basically similar to this thing where it's just the mesh component that's in here. And if you look at the object, all it has is a static mesh with a material. And you can move it around and it keeps its local position and stuff like that. And once you've done that, you can save the object there, come back to your scene, and then you can drag and drop it like it's a regular prefab. And by default, Unreal already has this thing set up so that you can interact with it. So if you press play, you should be able to jump right onto it. There we go. So right now it's just a static object. We want to make it more dynamic. So what I'm going to do is start adding logic to it. So I'm going to place this right over here in the scene for us to mess with later. And if we go back, we're going to move over to this event graph view. And event graph view is basically as if you opened up like Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, you opened up the C# script, and now you wanted to add code to your object. By default, you're going to see 3 events here. These correspond to like begin play is basically start or on enable. Actor begin overlap is related to collision events. You don't have to worry about that. And then you have this thing called event tick, which is basically on update. We're going to be adding code to the on update to have the cube rotate. So if you right click in a blueprint, you'll get this all actions for blueprint thing. So this is essentially like if you started typing something in Visual Studio Code, it'll have an autofill. This is basically everything you can do. So if I type in, for example, rotate, it'll come up with all the functionality you can use with this object to make it rotate. And you see it says content sensitive because it wants to know it for this blueprint, for example, and not show you stuff that you can't use for the blueprint. The one we want is let's see if I can do rotate actor or something like that. Rotate vector. Hold on, I need to get the cube, sorry. If you get the cube, then, so if you do this, you can drag and drop. This is basically a component reference. And then if you drag out this node, you get a content-specific reference of the functions you can use related to that cube. The other way you could have gotten this is if you right-clicked and typed in cube. The component that this blueprint has will show up down here in variables, and you can do a getter or a setter. So we're going to be using this getter, dragging it out. We're going to look for a rotate. And you're going to see that there's these transformation options. The one we want to do is, I think, just adding a local rotation. And you're going to see that there's these options here, right? So if we, and then there's these little arrows. So the arrows basically represent a going from one unit of execution to the other. So if you drag and drop like this, now the first thing this event text is going to do is the add local rotation. Right now it does nothing though. So so for example, if I, let's say, move my viewport over here, I want to put, there we go. If you press this button, it basically gets the blueprint nativized enough so that it can run it. So if we press play now, you'll see that it does nothing. If you press simulation, it'll run the cube only here. If you press play, it'll run it in the scene and open a window for you. So let's try adding a rotation to it on the Z-axis and see what happens. And I'll just press simulate. Simulation seems to not be doing anything. Hold on. It's showing here. There we go. I got to show up now. I think it wasn't compiled. So there we go. You can see that the object was rotating. As soon as you stop the simulation, it'll put it back to its original state as if nothing happens. One thing to note that I forgot about, in Unreal, let's see if I can get this right. I think Z is up, where you're used to in Unity, Y being up. In this case, this thing is really acting up. Oh. Okay, compile, don't forget to do that. I think you can set it to, these are the options. So if you use never, then it won't compile unless you force it to. I'm gonna do on success, so that way I don't have to press it constantly. And then there we go. Now we have an X-axis rotation. So that's on that red over there. If I do it on the Y, should see it go the other way now. There we go. So now it's on the green axis. And now for the blue axis, you can't see it here. Well, you can't see it as a grid, but it's that blue arrow. It'll rotate the way I want it to, which is around. There we go. So clockwise. And right now it's going at a stable speed, but and that's because this thing has a delta rotation already applied to it. If you did set rotation, then this wouldn't apply a delta to it, which is this thing over here. So I want to show you what that looks like, because this will be important for many functions. Let's say I did rotation here without that delta. Let's see if I can get it to behave. It's not really incrementing. And that's because there's an, it's just going to set it to 1 at all times. If I set it to delta seconds, then you'll see it, sorry, not, you have to use a variable. Let me do float. Usually I can make, let's just do that. Oh, that's right, I can drag out, sorry. If you drag out from this thing, you can add usually a variable. Okay, it's not working the way I thought. If you go here, you can add a variable. And let me just make a rotation. And now if I make this a float, I can drag this into here. I can drag a getter here and drag it there. So either way it works. It's not behaving how I like today. Anyway, so if you set that to do rotation, and then let's say I add, I set rotation of the object to do a +1 on it or something, then the rotation will update everything, and it will update the cube, and it'll go at an unstable speed without this delta seconds. If you multiply the rotation instead with that, then this will not occur, and this is this happens often with multiple functions, including character movement and stuff like that, possibly. So just important to keep that in mind. You want to use this because if your frame rate dips for any reason, it won't cause any crazy behavior. Okay, so we'll just use this for now, and I'll move on to showing this behavior now within the level. So now if I go on top of the cube, you'll rotate around with it. Okay, so now what I showed, relatively speaking, is basically how your interaction with Unreal is going to go the majority of the time. You're going to be able to see a viewport of anything you're working with, animation-wise, mesh-wise, material-wise. If I open up a material, it's going to be the same way. I get a viewport, I have a graph, I can do stuff with the graph, it'll change the way my object behaves. I can then use that thing either within another object like this blueprint here by setting this material to my new material. And then it will affect the object in the level if I press save, and now this thing's black. And ad infinitum, it won't change from there. So all it is at this point is learning the different types of functionality you can do. So how the widget, how you would do the same thing now for widgets, get the graphs, widgets, functions figured out so that you can show and hide a menu, spawning characters, adding objects like opening and closing gates, or in this case, since the theme is lost and found, maybe having objects hide or appear using a collider. So that's pretty much it for the beginner workshop. From here, I can take questions. I can keep showing stuff if people want to stay for time left over. But I didn't want to go further than this because this was already a huge amount, most likely for a beginner. Okay, does anyone have any questions, or, well, do you want me to point you to tutorial resources? I'm going to be linking them in the Discord for the Game Jam. But I can like talk about like what's available, maybe recommend based on what you guys are interested in, whether it be like 2D, 3D, VR, what kind of projects you should start out with first. If you want general information, I also have a a PowerPoint I'll be dropping in for just general game dev guides related to programming that I made for Make Games Miami way back. Okay. Oh, there's a chat. There we go. No problem. You're welcome. I still have time, but I know like essentially the workshop's supposed to end here. So again, like if you want me to go over anything else, I can. It's up to you guys. Yeah. I guess the only thing I'll show last, since there's no QA, is the one I recommend the most tutorial wise to really get this thing down for like maybe the first Vertus tutorial Unreal. Let's get that open. There we go. So game, there's this one called the RPG. There's also an FPS one. They're both fine, but I recommend the RPG one the most. There's about 50 videos here. Yeah, 50. If you go to the first 22 VODs, like up to here pretty much, you'll basically be very comfortable with Unreal as a beginner for the most part, and you'll have enough knowledge to make a small game easily for the scope of the game jam, for example. Maybe you can use a tutorial as a guide to help you get there. This RPG tutorial specifically goes over like setting up a character, giving it some abilities. Maybe you can use that to use magic, for example. This thing uses magic, has a UI component, and tells you how to interact with objects so that you can maybe, like I said, like one of the simple things you can do is make objects appear, disappear, or stuff like that. Maybe make a puzzle with that. So I can highly recommend that. Like I said, if you guys really go hard on the this tutorial and just using Unreal by tomorrow with the advanced workshop, you'll be able to kind of get a good grasp of what I'll be discussing related to the gameplay framework and other stuff without getting lost. Oh, there's one thing I did completely forget to show, which was the my pre-done project for you. So if you use this as your first template project, what I wanted to show was what kind of content I did provide here. So there's this template map that has some preset stuff inside. These are some physical objects. And if you go to here, I have a blueprint tutorial. Tells you what a blueprint is. And here's my notes that I was talking about of the major components that you're going to want to be looking into. Then I have a child of another blueprint. So I show you how to do polymorphism essentially. Have some functionality, so you can call functions and stuff like that. There's that rotate by delta offset that I was trying to show before, but unfortunately did it wrong. I have some introduction to the gameplay framework, all the notes related to it. I think in the level blueprint, I also have notes related to that. And I have some documentation links in the actual thing itself. Okay, and that's pretty much everything. So I hope you guys have a good game jam. I'll be around. I can answer pretty much any question you will ever have related to Unreal. where I am currently situated with it. I do use it at professional capacity for contracts and stuff. And if you're also interested at the C++ side of things, the advanced workshop, I can show that, but I don't think I will have time to. Or I can give an idea of how to get to that side of things, because I showed none of that here. As you can see, you didn't really don't need to actually use it as a beginner.